If you've ever watched a MrBeast gaming video, then you've noticed that no matter what size his camera is on the screen, it's always in perfect quality. But how do you do that? How do you take this small little camera in the corner and make it big and still have all the quality that comes with it? If you want maximum quality from your camera, there is only one solution, and that is that you have to record it at the biggest resolution that you would possibly want it. For most people, that's going to be the max resolution of their camera. And this applies to a standalone camera like this one, a webcam, or even a VTuber model. In a recent Mr. Who's the Boss video, he took a tour of the MrBeast warehouse, and inside that warehouse, we got a glimpse of what the gaming center looks like. And if you look here on this screen, you'll notice that there's an OBS Studio running and what appears to be an extra wide scene. They have the computer screen on one half, they have the camera on the other half, both recording at full 1080p resolution. You ready to replicate this? Let's do it together. All right, so we're here in OBS. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new profile, and you can call this whatever you want. You don't need the auto configuration wizard. We're going to go through everything step by step, and then go ahead and give yourself a new scene collection. Also call that whatever you want. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into settings. I don't care about anything in general, so we're going to move down to output. We're going to set our output mode to advanced. We're going to go over to the recording tab. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my recording format is MKV, and that is because MKV is recoverable from an error. If your computer crashes, MKV gives you footage to work with up until the point that it crashed. MP4 technically has an option called fragmented MP4, but that's like, oh, but that does it in chunks, and I don't really like that. Just stick with MKV. We'll turn it into a usable file format afterwards. For video encoder, I like to personally use NVIDIA NVENC H.264. I find that H.264 is exactly what I want. AV1 is supposed to be like the new hot thing. I don't have a card capable of running it. I can't tell you anything about it. If you're on an AMD card, whatever the hardware equivalent of that is for here, you might have to do some research for your particular GPU. I can't cover them all here. We're gonna turn on 2 audio tracks. See how we have checked 1 and 2? That's all we need. We're gonna go down to encoder settings, and this is where it's gonna entirely depend on the type of PC that you have. Now, if you're uploading videos to YouTube, YouTube provides a bitrate chart based on what you want to upload. So I want you to basically look at these thresholds. So let's say, for example, that we're going to try to make a 1080p 60 FPS video. You'll see here it recommends 12 megabytes per second. That is the lowest that you should go. I personally like to aim 50% higher. So what I would say do is, if you want to make 1080p 60 videos, aim for 50% higher. And if your computer struggles with that, bring it down. But if you have to bring the bit rate lower than the threshold on this table, that's where I recommend, okay, maybe it's time to go from 60 FPS to 30 FPS, or maybe from 1080 to 720. It's going to depend on your PC, but I recommend just starting with something and see what your computer is capable of. So in the case of this, I want the final video to be the recommended bit rate plus 50%. So that was 12 megabytes per second. So I want mine to be 18. Now I'm also recording in a double wide format. I want enough bit rate to cover that double wide recording so that no matter if I have the game or the camera on screen, there's enough bit rate to cover the quality. And this is kind of overkill. You don't have to do this. Like I said, like, do what's best for your system. So essentially I'm going to need 12 and 12 together, which is 24. And then I need another 50% on top of that. So I'm going to set mine to 36,000. It's in kilobytes per second, even though that chart was megabytes. Just scale it by 1,000. Everything else can stay the same on this tab. Now I go into audio. For desktop audio, I like to just route my games to system. That way everything just goes to the same track all the time. And then I will add in my microphone, add in whatever microphone you have. I have a Go XLR. You can see the track names. Now, if we go back to our output tab with the audio, you can add additional audio tracks. If you say you're playing a game with friends in Discord and you want the Discord audio in the game as well, go ahead and give yourself a 3rd track here. And then under desktop audio, you'll have to add the Discord audio through whatever routing system you have on your PC, whether it's like the Elgato Wave system, a Go XLR. Now we're gonna go down to video. So here's where we want to get that double wide thing. So our base canvas is 1920 by 1080, but we're gonna double this front number, which is the width, to 3840. And you'll see the aspect ratio that jumps us to 32:9 instead of 16:9. And also fix this output scaled resolution. We don't want it to change. We want it to be exactly the same as what we're working with. I'm gonna set this to 60 again. If you need to go down to 720, then remember, just double the width. So double the 1280 and then make that your, it doesn't really matter what the numbers are as long as the aspect ratio is 32:9, but try to stick with 1080 or 720. Then we're going to go down to advanced and we're going to hit this check box right here that says automatically remix to MP4. That's going to take your file as soon as you're done recording and it's automatically going to rewrap it out of that MKV into a nice MP4 file. to put in your video editor. And you'll see we have our audio sources down here. I want you to right click in the audio mixer and go to advanced audio properties. And you'll see here you have a bunch of check marks. So what I like to do is put the microphone on track 1. So I'm going to turn all these other check boxes off. And then I want the desktop audio to go to track 2. So I'm going to turn off everything but 2. And you'll remember we did the checks for the 1 and 2, and that's what I'm corresponding those here. That means I have 2 tracks and I'm designating what goes to those tracks. If you were doing a Discord play, like I mentioned earlier, you would add the Discord in and you would check it as number 3. All right, so let's add our sources in. So now we can have, now for capturing games, we could use display capture, or we could use game capture. Game capture will pick whatever full screen there is. I personally prefer display capture because sometimes when I play like indie horror games, they tend to be made by indie devs, and sometimes they get locked into weird resolutions and all that. And maybe I need to crop something, or maybe I need to pull up something in a web browser. I find display capture is easy. It just, whatever's on this screen gets captured and I'm good to go. For the sake of this tutorial, I just did game capture because I'm doing too many things on my computer. And then next we'll just add our camera in. We'll pick video capture device, and you're not going to see my camera because it's not plugged into my computer because I'm using it for this recording, but this is what this Elgato thing is. Now, if you're a VTuber and you're using something like that, what I would have you put here is basically a copy of your VTuber with a green screen, because the idea is we'll bring the VTuber over, we'll key out the green, and then you can have your VTuber be whatever size you want to. Also, if you're adding any kind of device here for capturing video that also has an onboard microphone, I like to mute it and then hide it. Otherwise, it's going to interlap with all your other audio and basically just ruin the whole process. And that's it. You just hit recording, play your game, and you're good to go. By the way, if you enjoy the content like this and would like to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. So now we have this fancy double wide footage. How do we use it? What I'm about to show you works for any video editor. You just may have to take different steps to get to the same result. Now, if you take this footage and you drop it down here into the timeline area, what it's going to do is it's going to create a sequence based on the attributes of the video you just dropped in which case it's giving you a sequence that's double wide, and that's not what we want. That's bad. So what we want to do is we want to create a sequence that is equal to our final project. In this case, 1920 by 1080, 60 FPS. I'm going to call this Cuppy Game because that was the name of the game that I played here. I'm going to drag this footage down, and you'll see we have this footage that's way too big for our timeline. So most video editors will have some type of coordinate system for the canvas. In the case of Premiere Pro, the upper left corner is your 0 coordinates, goes horizontal all the way to 1920, and then the Y position goes down vertical all the way to the 1080 position. Video editors like Final Cut Pro and DaVinci Resolve, they start with their 0 coordinates in the middle, and they go horizontal and vertical with positive and negatives instead. So instead of having like positions of 1920 and 1080, you'll have positions of like positive or negative 540 and positive and negative 960. So media typically starts with what's called an anchor point in the middle that you'll see right here. So if I want to line this game up to the center, I need to move this all the way over. So instead of just sliding this around and hoping it kind of like locks into place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate what I need to move the position of this to have it perfect. You don't want to just slide it around and guess, because then you're left with like little edges on the side there, and then it kind of ruins your footage. So we need to slide it all the way to the 1920 mark to lock it into pixel perfect place. So this first method is what I call the crop method. Then you can hold the Alt key and click on the video track, and still holding the Alt key, you can lift it up to duplicate it. Then what you can do is, here, we'll scale this down to like 40%. That's what I like, so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. And we're essentially going to crop off the game half. And because we tend to have a lot of excess space here, I'm just gonna like crop off everything that's not actually me. And then what I like to do is I like to put the anchor point in the corner of wherever I'm going to shove this camera at. So for instance, I'm going to put it here. I like to put it a little bit into the footage. I like to give myself a little bit of wiggle room, and then you can either shove it into the corner and make sure it's in there, or you can do what I like to do, which is just put it on 0, 0. Remember your coordinates. If it won't be 0, 0 if you're not using Premiere. If your video editor uses a center-based coordinate center, you're gonna have to calculate what that upper corner would be. And there you go. And then you can slide through this and you can edit it. You can actually kind of see here, like I'm having trouble skimming through this because essentially I've slapped 2 double wide 1080 footages on top of each other. Even though we only see 1080, the computer is still processing all that background footage, and so we're essentially editing 4 times 1080, which is 4K. We're essentially trying to edit 4K, and that's going to make a lot of computers struggle. So if your computer can't handle this, mine can't. The next idea is you can do the crop method with proxies, and you'll have to follow whatever system your video editor uses for making proxies. But even then, I'm not a huge fan of the crop method in general. So what I like to do is something called the export method. So I've created a new sequence, 1080p 60, called camera. I'm going to drop this footage in here, and I'm going to do something similar we did during the crop method, where I basically move this over so that it takes over. In this case, make sure you type in the position. You want it to be pixel perfect. So I slide that over, and now I just have my game on the screen. I'm gonna alt click the game track and delete it. That leaves me with just my camera and the audio. I've created a second sequence called game, and I'm gonna do the same thing, but with the game footage. We'll type in our position, pixel perfect. I'm gonna delete the microphone audio, and that leaves me with just the game and the game's audio. And then I'm going to take both of these sequences and I'm going to export them into their own individual files. If you want, you can set a target bit rate of your export plus 50%. So in this case, 18 megabytes per second. I don't struggle with computer storage space. I just use whatever the default media encoder setting is, which is adaptive high bit rate, and I let it do its thing. If you've put enough bit rate into the starting file, you're not going to struggle a lot with quality. All right, so now I have my two files. Now I can just bring the game on and bring the camera on. And because we did that double wide, they'll be time code synced. So you snap them both to 0 and they'll be in sync. And this is about 50% easier to edit than what we had, because we have two 1080 files instead of basically 4. To see that I can just shove that in the corner, and now I have something that's significantly easier to edit. I like splitting the files up like this because if I ever want to come back to them and make TikToks or shorts or anything like that, I have two split files, and then I'll usually delete the original media once my project's done, because I don't need the double wide and the separate files. It's a little bit time consuming, but I find it easier to edit, and then you don't have to worry about proxies. But I will say, if my project's big enough, and this one actually was, this was an hour-long round of footage, I did the export split, and then I still made proxies just for editing this project. Is it overkill? Absolutely. You can probably just go with the crop method and proxies if you want to do that. I just like my files to be simple. I like to have a game and a camera. If you're working on a short project in like the 10-20 minute range, you don't even need proxies probably. The game and camera will be enough for you. Again, it's personal preference. You can do the crop method with proxies, or you can do the split method, or you can be unhinged like me and do the split method with proxies. Don't ask me how many hard drives of storage I have back there. But this gets you started. Now you can go through and you can cut up your footage and make a great video. Now that you know how to record great footage, you're going to want to go over here and watch this video for some editing tips on how to get 1 million views on your next TikTok.